The time has come. If I could get your attention, please. Right. So, I can't believe it, but we've had quite a journey this weekend of events for Reconciliation Weekend that started with a pilgrimage of walking with the enslaved, the church's role in slavery, followed by a dinner on Friday, and then yesterday we had oh, wow. It was a transformative racial healing workshop with Dr. Meeks, and many of you were here. And then the service was really, wow, very touching, and thank you so much for your words and your witness. Dr. Meeks, you have blessed us deeply. I am just going to open with a brief prayer and quickly introduce these two esteemed guests so that they can begin a discussion with the time that we're going to end up going till 12:30 to make up for lost time. So I'm just giving you a heads up now. Let us pray. O loving God, when we feel overwhelmed by darkness in the world, the violence, injustice, poverty, oppression, and abuse, give us hope not to be overcome. Give us eyes to see your goodness for our world. Give us the strength to hold the pain of injustice in our world and faith that it will end. Give us courage to be honest with ourselves about why and how we are doing justice, that we may know true healing and wholeness, and it may be well with our souls. Amen. So it is my great delight and pleasure. I'm Gwen. I'm the Associate for Community Engagement here at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, and we are joined by Dr. Catherine Meeks, as well as I'm going to say the very Reverend, the Reverend Dr. Lee Hill, who is the Diocese of Virginia's canon for racial justice and healing. And just another second about Dr. Hill, he's a busy guy. And is leading both the Racial Justice and Healing Committee for the Diocese, and several of those folks were with us over the weekend, and also the Reparations and Truth Task Force for the Diocese, which met yesterday, and which our very own Jabril Hassan is the co-chair of, who's back in the back. Yes. And I do just want to put in another plug for Dr. Meeks' new institute called Turquoise and Lavender, Institute for Transformation and Healing, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And also, please go there, learn more about her, learn more about her work, and sign up for her blog called The Crone Report. And with that, we are really blessed to have these two in conversation about how do we define racial reparations, and what is the church's call to engage in the work of reparations and reparative action around racism. So the first question, and is like, let's do 101 here. How do you define racial reparations? Both what they are not and what they should be.
Well, I've got, I guess, what is this? 8 minutes or so. So good morning still. It is really a joy and honor to be back in the space and to share time with you, and to be in particular, to be in dialogue around the work of racial justice, and in particular, the work of reparations and restorative justice. Um, I like to think about this work more specifically around this idea of repair. Um, and I often like to frame the ways in which we engage in this work around these three kind of identity kind of pillars, or three kind of ways of framing it. One is around education. It's around understanding our history, the shared history that we have. Part of that history we embodied in a very physical way on Friday of walking with the enslaved, of remembering the story, recalling the history, and embodying that in real physical and tangible ways, standing in the ashes of our country's original sin. So, that idea of education. The next framing of that for me is thinking about the important work of listening, because reparative justice work, no matter how we frame it, must involve communities that are beyond the communities that are trying to do the work of repair. And so that means that we have to be able and ready to engage with communities that have often been marginalized or pushed aside, communities that are often thought to be invisible but are really in broad daylight, plain in sight, and being in dialogue about what are the things that are needful and needed in those respective communities. And what I find is that often that work then sends us back into the work of education, and then back into a space of listening, and maybe back again to the work of education and listening even more, so that we have a holistic understanding of not only the history, but also the needs of the communities in which are surrounding us. And then we get to the work of mending or making repair. Reparations at root simply means repair, repairing that which has been broken, repairing that which has been stolen.
And good morning again to everybody. And I want to say reparations has got absolutely nothing to do with trying to identify who descended from a slave so you can give them 50 cents. And that is just the way, that is a cheap, inconsequential way to deal with guilt. And we don't have any time for that. And I'm very tired of it, because in the first place, there's not enough money on the planet
Amen.
to make up for what happened to enslaved persons from Africa. So we need to get over that. The hardest part and the most important part of this work has very little to do with money. It has to do with will and intention and a desire to reconstruct this society so that Black people and brown people and poor people can have a chance to live the life that God intended for them to live when they were sent to the earth. And there's no shortcut to get there. And we need to decide if we're serious about this work, or else we need to stop this conversation. Because what I have seen so far is so much jockeying around and people meeting and wanting to have a gazillion dollars that they don't even know what they're going to do with, all to keep from dealing with the fact that until little Black boys and girls can walk the streets in safety, have decent places to live, have decent education, have decent access to health care, and have a chance to live life and grow up to be human beings that do not have to worry about being killed by police because they live in a Black body, we have done nothing to repair. And if I sound tired and passionate, you got it.
Okay, so that was a really, thank you for the what it needs to be and what it should not be. So, how does our faith as Christians, as followers, disciples of Jesus Christ, call us to the work of racial reparations in scripture, in our what we do on Sundays, in the sacraments? Like, what for you, where do you go when you're like pointing to, here is our moral obligation as followers of Jesus Christ to do this work of racial repair?
I think that there's several places in the Gospels that we can point to. Zacchaeus is a common a narrative that is lifted up. Texts out of Isaiah are also common texts that bring this sense of repairing that which has been broken. Um, but and I want to. Canon Heidi Kim and I have been in dialogue about a lot of this work around racial justice and repair. And what I fundamentally believe about this work is one, it makes us all very tired. And as we continue to do this work, uh, if we are not grounded in something that is greater than us, our sense of being really, truly loving Jesus and being grounded in Jesus's narrative and Jesus's story, that we will run ourselves crazy trying to do the work, that there has to be this depth of spirituality that gives us the strength to keep on keeping on when the times are hard and the going gets rough, all of that. And so for me, it's not a particular story of Jesus, but it is looking at the entire life of Jesus. And as Dr. Meeks said in her sermon this morning, not not this high lifted up King of Kings, right? But this story of Jesus who walked the earth, the Howard Thurman Jesus, right? Who walked this earth and who sat with the poor and who sided with the poor and brought in those folks who were marginalized and oppressed and found room for them. It's looking at Jesus's life holistically in this way, not a particular narrative. And I think that as we continue to deepen our senses of spirituality, as we continue to grow in our faith and our understanding, that we are then given the strength and courage that we need to continue in the work that is necessary to make repair a reality.
And thank you, Lee. That's wow. The other place is it starts inside of you with when you turn your intention toward gratitude and generosity. So unless you're willing as an individual person to give in a generous way to folks who need, you're not willing for the collective to do it. You see, you're not going to be willing for the world to get better to any extent beyond what you're willing internally to live into. So when people talk about uh, reparations, it's something somebody else is supposed to go take care of. But you've got to ask yourself, when you pass by folks on the street that don't have food, do you have a generosity of heart toward them or a heart of judgment? How do you look at them? How do you think about them? Because everything starts at the very tiny place inside of yourself where you're ready to let go of something. And if we're not ready to let go of our comfort and our what's knowable to us, what's common to us. You see, in order to really do reparations in the United States of America, we've got to disrupt some systems. And until you get ready to disrupt those systems, you're having a nonsense conversation. And it starts inside of ourselves. How do I look? How am I willing? What am I willing to do in order for somebody else's life to be a little bit better? And like I said yesterday, I have rheumatoid arthritis, so I do not get on airplanes to go places to play games. I am here to tell you that I understand when I pass by people on the street that I've got to be willing for my heart to be broken that they have to sleep outdoors tonight, because that's where reparations starts. And that if my heart is broken to a little bit at a time, not all at once, David White says, be a little bit braver, a half a shade braver. each time that I peel away a little bit of my layer that is scared to think about it because it could be me, so I don't want to think about them being homeless. It's their fault because, see, and I'm better than that because all that stuff's tied up with how willing are we to let people have a chance. You have to ask yourself, do you want everybody in the country to have what they need? Do we want it? Do we want equality? And I basically don't think we do. Because this is what reparations is about. And it's why we haven't gotten anywhere with it. Because basically, we do not want everybody to have what they need. We like having hierarchies and poor people. As a nation, I don't know about you in this room, but we have to interrogate the foundation, we have to interrogate the truth if we intend to transform it. We can't play. It's not a game. It's a tough call. And we're going to have to give up some stuff to get there. And people don't want to give up anything. I wish that I could be, healthy and well and wonderful and never have to do anything but eat all the junk I want to eat and just never exercise and all that. That would be nice, but you cannot live that way. Life requires stuff. And you all listen to me. We have done nothing yet in this country about reparations. We have done nothing. The little bit of stuff we've done has been mostly to get news stories and sound bites and to make ourselves look better and to deal with our guilt a little bit. That's it. We have done nothing until we make this country better. And it's going to cost us something. So that's where you start. Never mind what Jesus said. You got to start with, what am I willing to do here? Because until you get that clear, you're not going to do what Jesus said anyway, because he's not even here to bother you. I'm serious about it, so we need to stop having this play conversation unless we decide we want to be really serious. Do we want people? Do we really and truly want to see? Are we willing to live in a world where everybody has what they need? And, because we start with this, I worked hard and I got what I got. That's the wrong place to start. You start with, am I willing for people to have what I would sleep better. I would sleep better at night if I knew everybody had a bed to sleep in. And I don't care how they get the bed. I don't care if somebody gives it to them, they work for it. If it falls out of the sky, I don't care. What I care about is I wish everybody had a bed to sleep in, because then I could sleep better. I wish everybody lived inside of a house, because then I could enjoy rainy days better, because I would know that I didn't have friends who were getting soaking wet. I could sleep better in the wintertime sitting by my fire if I knew everybody had warmth. So it matters to me that way. And what about you? You have to ask and answer the question for yourself. And it doesn't matter how much we try how many committees, we got these dysfunctional committees talking about this subject, and we need to disband them and start a new conversation. I'm serious. I'm tired of wasting God's resources, God's time, and getting nowhere. Aren't y'all tired of that?
Yes.
Don't you think it's time we quit it? Just quit the whole thing until we decide what is the real conversation we're going to do and have. And what are we really going to do? I want to see the church shine in the world in a way that blinds the darkness, because we have become the light God meant for us to be. How about that for a vision?
So between what it's not and the vision for what it is, can you help us also imagine what reparative action looks like as the institution of the Episcopal Church and as the Diocese of Virginia. And I'm curious, Lee, first to hear what are some of the ideas that have arisen. I mean, this is such a lightning rod topic, right? And it elicits many emotions, and people get defensive, and a lot of times people disassociate and shut down. We're asking you to be really present right now. We're all trying and here for this. And but what does it really look like at the end of the day?
So I think that the gospel is a lightning rod topic, right? Following Jesus makes us lightning rods in many ways. And I am not exactly sure what it looks like beyond what Dr. Meeks has named, which is the flourishing of life for everybody, right? But the practical lived out thing, like the thing that you can point to and say, that right there is it. I'm not sure about that. And I think that it looks very different in every different community because the needs of the community are often different. And so the way that it becomes lived out in kind of practical ways are varied. Um, I've been recently reading this book from Thomas and Quan called Reparations, a Call for Christians, or something of that nature. And Thomas and Quan, cite a really lovely litany of examples at the end of that, and at the end of that book around what does this look like in real ways. And I took issue with a few of those sightings, right? Like, I'm not quite so sure. But I don't live in those communities. And for those who live in those communities, the living out of that reparative work for them looks like this. If they followed the example, right, of educating themselves, of being in the community, of discerning what is necessary and what is needed, then living into that work of repair looks like this for them. But I think in all of our work, particularly in the work that's happening with the Truth and Reparations Task Force, our primary work so far has really been uncovering the truth. And how do we begin to tell that truth in real and practical ways that will make folks listen and hear the ways in which white supremacy and colonialism has raised itself up in this country through this diocese's efforts and support and affirmation and how do we tell that story and get to that truth and allow our folks, and this is the other thing, is that we often move too quickly into this work of making it right, of trying to find the thing to fix it. I think that we need time, more time spent sitting in the lament of it all and just holding it and understanding and feeling the kind of pain and the ways in which systemic racism continues to this very day to impact people. 95 is the example. We cross it back and forth all the time. The ways in which it has impacted lives, hurt people. I think if we sit in that for a moment, instead of trying to rush to absolve ourselves of it, to say that we've done a good thing, to put a Band-Aid on it, I think that we might get closer to this real lived thing of repair after we've sat and been present to the hurt and the pain in the world.
Yeah, I really do want to speak to the part about having some patience because we didn't get here in a hurry and we're not going to get away from it in a hurry, I think. But if do you have any kind of program here where you provide food for people that are hungry? Do you know those people? You know their lives? You know what they do? You know how you could help them? How could you help them not need to come here for food? Because see, that's simple. You can do that. They're in the room with you. How many of those people could you help get to be self-sufficient so they don't need your food? That's reparations. You teach a person to fish or you give them a fish sandwich. So, how many folks can you teach to fish of the folks that you're giving sandwiches? Would be a question I'd want to ask. And this is not a judgment. This is just, I'm just talking about ideas. But we get too lofty. We want to change the whole structure, and then we miss the things we actually could have done in the process. So, are there women who come here who could, do they have jobs, or I don't know the circumstances of the folks that come to your programs, but there's so many things every day that can be done to begin to continue to dismantle the oppressive structures in the society. Then, when you're making decisions about things, some people still work. What kinds of decisions do you make in your workplace that affect people's lives? What is the sensibility that you bring to those decisions? What is the thought process? All of this is a part of the work of reparations that gets way beyond trying to find somebody and give them a few dollars so they can buy another handbag that they don't need. See, I think that that I keep saying you start in these small places because that's where you begin to deconstruct the barriers that keep making it possible for systemic racism, because basically all we're talking about is dismantling systemic racism's impact upon the lives of people, and we're trying to dismantle something that is continuing to work very effectively. So it's like trying to fix a pipe without turning the water off. So there you are trying to mend this pipe and the water is coming through. That is what we're up against. You're trying to repair the result of a system that's continuing to exist and doing damage. And so how do you do that? I mean, it almost feels like a stupid task, because here you are trying to fix what's not intending to be fixed. And you could say, well, just it's too much, just don't worry about it, just let it go. We can't do it. And we can't do it the way we think we can do it. We cannot throw money at it. We need to throw engagement, relationship, and sacrifice, inconvenience. That's what's needed. And those are the things we'd much rather not engage with, because it will require then deconstructing stuff inside of ourselves. So, and you have to decide if you want to be in this in a real way, or if you're just going to say, God, it's too big of a task and I'm not doing it. You do have a choice. And it's more honest to be clear about making the choice to either do it or admit that you're not going to do it and go do something else. But we just keep burdening. That's part of why we don't get anything done, because we keep on burdening ourselves. Like, I'm never going to weigh 112 pounds. I weighed that when I was 12. I'm not going to get there again. So if I try to tell myself, well, let me just eat less and see if I can I'm not going to do it. So I don't need to play that game with myself. So I want to encourage you today to think very carefully about, do you really want to do this? And to be willing to say, if you don't really want to do it, we decided we'd rather do something else. Then do that something else with all your heart and soul, and quit messing around with the stuff you don't intend to do. Because ultimately, God knows anyway. And I think that's more honest. I think that's more where we need to be as people of faith, really confessing Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't do it, but I am suggesting that you make up your mind about it. And that people, because I think when something gets to be where it's just conflict after conflict after conflict, that you have to go back and interrogate what's going on. And I think with reparations in the church, that we haven't done any better with it because we really don't want to do it. And I want us to either confess that or then go do it. And it takes patience and it takes time, and it's not going to be done in my lifetime. I'm really clear about that part. But we've got such great need in this country, and we're the people of faith that are supposed to be responsible, taking responsibility to be the light, to be somebody for God in this work. And then so how do we do that? And are we up to doing it? And my answer is I'm not up to doing it, God, but my weakness is made perfect in your strength. My weakness is made perfect in your strength. And I will do as much as I can do as long as you give me what I need to do it. And I don't know where you are with that. I can't speak to that. But have trying to have a reparations conversation without dealing with the kind of foundation down here is like trying to teach somebody to drive when they can't see. So it's a ridiculous task. And I don't think we can afford to keep on playing around with this. I think we need to get to the cut to the core and start talking about this the way we need to. And without judgment, we got to quit feeling guilty and judging ourselves and use that energy to listen to what God might be trying to tell us. Because we waste so much time feeling guilty. Did feeling guilty ever do anything? I mean, did you ever achieve anything from feeling guilty? You only achieve something when you say, I'm accepting this is how it is. Now, how can I move from here to there? And I wish white folks could get, if God would say to me, you can have one wish, I would say, God, could you take the emotion of guilt away from white people? Because you go around feeling guilty because you're white, and I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. You hear, and God sent you here that way. And you don't need to feel guilty. White skin is superior in this country. Use it to help folks who are not white. Don't feel guilty. Use it. It's a piece of your tool of empowerment. I'm an educated woman. I don't feel guilty about being educated. I use my education to help folks who didn't have that chance. Because they don't need me to feel guilty. They need me to help them. And so if you can open a door for me because you're white and I'm not, then could you please do that and quit feeling guilty? Or at least take your guilt and come with me anyway. So that's enough about that.
Thank you. I've got one other question, and then I want to open it up for a couple of questions before we conclude. This is going way too fast. So I hear how important it is to do the inner work of healing, of education, of deep, deep listening, and then going back to do more education and more listening. And so how can the church play a role in being a center, being that brave space for the kind of inner repair and inner healing that needs to happen so that we can start to have some meaningful and authentic conversations about the repair that desperately is needed, and that we have the resources, and I do believe we are called as followers of Jesus to do.
Yeah. So I think that work begins with discipleship. And it begins too with telling the truth about ourselves, our own historical narratives, where we have come from, the land that we have stolen, speaking truth about our own lives. And then it's also speaking truth about the institutions in which we gather. How do we tell the truth about this place in a way that lives beyond just this community, but it extends out to the community where folks are saying, oh, yes, that's St. Paul's, but they tell this story about their history. This is who they are, and this is who they were. It begins with this work of interrogating your own soul of, and the collective soul of the church. And when we begin to do that work, I think then we then become open to new ways of thinking and being and living in the world that gives us a greater appreciation for that which has been missing from the community for so long. And then we sit back and we say, how did we get on so long without having this giftedness or this person or this diversity or this way of being in our presence? We are better because we are more diverse. We are better because we have welcomed more folks in. We are better because we have loved hard. We're better because we have transformed our hearts. I think that it begins with the transformation of our hearts. When our hearts are broken open by truth, by real truth, raw truth that rips against all of the historical narratives that have been told, that have been passed on, that have been hidden, that have been kept silent and quiet in our communities. I want to say one other piece about this in thinking about, because I've been thinking a whole lot about imagination. I've been talking to Dr. Meeks about this idea around imagination. And what I loved about the walk that we did on Friday, the ride we did on Friday, was the invitation that Nikki gave us to imagine, to spend time imagining what life was like. And Judy Fentress Williams talks about this in terms of biblical imagination, that we have got to do this hard work of imagining. And what we learn out of this place of imagination, Marcia Riggs and Mitzi Smith down in Atlanta, all of those folks talk about it allows us and gives us the space that we need to fill in the gaps in the history that have been missing. And so our imaginations are sacred. They're holy places where we are able to tell a story of life because we know our own stories of life. And so when Nikki invited us to think about that space and to imagine, the initial thought is, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what that was, because we don't want to imagine. But when we do, we lean into a truthfulness that takes us deeper and allows us to anchor ourselves in a way, I hope, that rends our hearts.
And I would just add, though, because I'm such a process person, you're not going to be able to imagine what somebody's life, what an enslaved person's life was like, or a white person owning slaves, or a planter, or whatever, if you can't imagine about your own life right now. So what how do you employ imagination in your present moment will have a lot to do with your ability to go backwards to imagine what it might have been like for somebody, or to imagine what it's like for somebody in the present moment who is different from you. Because and the church can do a whole lot better teaching people about process. We tell you you're supposed to be some kind of way. You're supposed to read the scripture and be this way, but nobody talks to you about how do you get there. You know, you're supposed to be forgiving, but how do you do it? Somebody does something to you 20 years ago, and you still working on trying to forgive them. because nobody told you that you needed to go inside and see what did that connect to, and why is it so hard for you to let it go, and what were the lessons you were supposed to have learned that you didn't get to yet that won't let you be free from what happened to you. We just hate process, and I think that we could do a whole lot better with teaching, you know, uh, to use our ability to create and to think in our daily work and life and trying to understand the journey we're on ourselves if we want to try to understand and imagine what other people what other people's lives might have been like. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens instantaneously. You know, you see somebody that's been on a path for 20 years and you think they just showed up there. They've been working hard to get there. So I want to hold up the banner for let's teach people more about how you go from point A to point B to point C to point D so they have skills. Because this is about some having some skills. This is not magic. It's about skills. Discipline, the discipline of your heart, the discipline of your mind, so that you begin to think differently, that you quit projecting onto people. Because when you start projecting, you let yourself know that's what you're doing. You're making up a tale and you need to stop it. You know, if I drive by somebody on the road and they're driving a Maserati and I start talking about who they must be, I'm projecting because I don't know anything about them. And I'm really talking about myself. But we don't talk about this kind of stuff enough. And so we don't have the skills we need to do the job that we're trying to do. And the church has failed in that and needs to get itself in gear to do a better job of helping people to develop those kinds of skills. And we need to also make space for people to tell the truth about themselves. To say, I don't want to do it. I'm tired. I don't want to hear it anymore, but I'm going to do it anyway because I love the community. And be able to do that without having to be judged or feel like you're going to be thrown away. Because we should be able to come into the church and say our truth and be loved just the same, even if our truth doesn't make somebody comfortable. You don't get to come and be abusive. You don't get to come and be a slouch, but you get to come and be truthful. Because if you're slouching, we'll tell you about it. If you're abusive, we won't tolerate it, but we will still love you. That's what the church ought to be. And when the church is that, other things will happen better. I'm convinced of it. And I don't expect to see it next week, but I'm going to keep on believing in it.
Thank you both so much. I'm afraid we're going to have to, if you all have books or you want to ask a couple of questions afterward, but we're going to need to wrap this up now to respect everybody's time. And we've also really, we've worn you out, Dr. Meeks. Um, so could we please express our gratitude with some applause? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hill. Thank you, Dr. Meeks. What a blessing. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I want to let you all know on your way out, the Racial Justice and Healing team has put together a list of resources and organizations, including Turquoise and Lavender, Institute for Transformational Healing, and the Episcopal Diocese of Virginia's Truth and Reparations Task Force website that you can grab on your way out, along with some books that we recommend, and hope that will be part of your continuing listening and education journey. And we thank you for being here, and blessings.